I'm still here, Hollywood. And coming up on today's episode, what if you could sit inside the room where careers are decided? Today's guest has done exactly that for years, helping determine which actors step into the roles that audiences eventually cannot imagine anyone else playing. Along the way, he has witnessed the industry's cycles of expansion and contraction. And now he is watching a new frontier take shape with the emergence of vertical storytelling. His job is to see the future of talent, sometimes before the talent sees it themselves. This is Still Here Hollywood. I'm Steve Kmetko. Join me with casting director Paul Ruddy. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
I have in my mind's eye, tell me if I'm wrong, this image of you sitting at a desk, someone coming in and throwing a script on your desk, and you going, ooh, this is going to be fun to bring to life. How far off am I?
You're very close. You're very close. I mean, I got into casting because growing up, I was a kid who was obsessed with television. I'm an only child, grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the home of The Office. And I was, when I say obsessed, I paid attention to who wrote, produced, directed. I wasn't just paying attention to the actors. And this is in the days before, VCRs. And so you had to actually physically sit there and watch the thing or you missed it. And I had every book on film, TV, and theater. I collected TV guides as a kid, which I was a weird child.
Oh, come on.
But I wanted to get into this business from the time I could remember, but it would have been as if I said I wanted to go to the moon, growing up where I did. And it wasn't until I was out of college and I had gone to law school and practiced law for a couple of years and was bored out of my mind with what I was doing and thought I can't do this for 40 years. And I took a leap of faith and started applying for jobs in New York and LA and found a classified ad in Variety. I got a copy of Variety off of a newsstand, and it was an anonymous ad for a talent agency, and it said Beverly Hills Talent Agency looking for applicants for agent training program. And I faxed my resume in, and stroke of luck got an appointment. They thought I was living here. I lied on the resume, said I lived in Valencia, because I thought if I put Pennsylvania, they're not going to pay attention to me. And I flew out here, did an interview with HR on a Wednesday, and then with the head of the company on a Friday. And it was an agency called Abrams Artist, which is no longer around. But I interviewed with Harry Abrams, who was a veteran of the business even then, and got the job. And I started the following Monday. And worked at a couple talent agencies before I got into casting. I know this is kind of a long answer to your initial question, but the agency part of it wasn't created enough for me. I wanted to be able to put puzzles together, to be able to be a part of the overall project. And one of the agents I worked with about 2 years into living out here said to me, "You're the idiot savant of actors." And I said, "I think that's a compliment."
Yeah. And
he brought that up because I tell this to actors all the time too. There's so much randomness in this business. And there happened to be a restaurant across the street from the agency I was working at. And you would win a cake if you answered an actor trivia question correctly. And every time I went there, I got the question right, and I would bring a cake back. So like the 40th time I brought the cake in, he said, "I think you are on the wrong side of the fence," and introduced me to friends of his that were casting a pilot. And we hit it off, and I got hired by them. And I knew immediately that's where I needed to be. To me, it's an integral part of any project, whether it be film, TV, theater, and now verticals. And it is very exciting, especially when you get a good script where your imagination just starts running.
You've probably changed the trajectory of more lives than you can count. When did you first realize that the power a casting director wields is far greater than you thought?
Really early on. It's. I remember I had a mentor years ago who said to me, "There's very few jobs where you can say, I have a positive impact on somebody's life." And that's really nice. We're not brain surgeons. We're not curing cancer, but to be able to pick up a phone and call somebody and say you got the job and affect them in a way that could alter the rest of their life, it's really, really nice. There's been so many people over the years that I've given first jobs to that the one that comes to mind most recently is Sydney Sweeney, who I put in 3 early Lifetime movies back in the day. And I brought her in all the time, and she was consistently good in auditions. And, she had a spark. And you can tell almost instantly when somebody comes in.
You can.
Yeah, I mean, even now with self-tapes, for years, the first 20-some years I was doing this, it was live auditions. And you could tell almost when you saw them in the lobby. You got a sense of their personality and whether they were right right before they would even read a line of dialogue. I would chat with them, and you would get a sense of who they were, if there was the right fit for the character. And 9 times out of 10, I'd be right. They'd come in the room, and you get a sense. Now with the self-tapes, which have been prevalent since the pandemic, you can tell probably in the first 20 seconds.
How often does that happen?
Most of the time.
Really?
And I try to tell actors, I teach a lot of workshops around LA, and one of the pieces of advice I give to actors is you got to go in and, having done your homework, you got to understand the character, you got to understand the tone of the scene, the context, and we try to give you as much information as possible before you come in. And often I send the entire script along with the sides that they have to prepare. And I want everybody to hit a home run when they come in. And I think probably the biggest mistake that I see is they're not off book. And you're never going to get a job if you're not off book.
By that you mean have it memorized?
Have it memorized, yeah. But we can't tell people to memorize. That we're not allowed to say that.
Why not?
It's a SAG rule that's been in place since the last strike. And now I want to clarify something. We never did. I don't know a casting director that ever emphatically said you have to be memorized. We always assume this is common sense. If you're an actor, you got to come in knowing the words. If you don't know the words, you can't make choices. You can't become the character. And so that right off the bat is rule number 1. If you don't know what's on the page, we can't play with you. We can't give you an adjustment because you don't know where you're going to go with it.
Right. Can you feel star power immediately, or is it something that people grow into?
I think both. I think there's certain people that I've had come in that immediately you go, there's a quality to them. They light up the room when they come in. And then I've seen actors that there's actors now, I'm not going to say who they are, that came in for their first auditions. And I want to stay working in this business.
Yes, I understand.
They came in for their first auditions and were absolutely dreadful. And the ones that work at it, that go to class, that continually study, are the ones that grow. I remember one young actor, first audition, this is going back like 23 years ago. He came in wearing a wetsuit. He had just been surfing. Now, also not something common sense would tell you, don't go in for a job interview wearing a wetsuit.
You get one chance to make a first impression.
Yeah, and that was his first impression. And he was late, he didn't know the script, it was just a disaster. And it was several years before I brought him in again for something else. And he came in the second time, and he had been studying with a number of teachers and had grown exponentially. And now he's a series regular on a major hit show. So when you put the work into it, I've seen people grow. I mean, there's some people that are just innately talented. That just right out of the gate, they have something. I think Jodie Foster's a great example of that. Like, just, she started when she was basically a toddler. Mm-hmm. But there's other actors that I've seen over the years grow and evolve, and and sometimes you age into parts too. There's actors like Estelle Getty from the Golden Girls, whose career basically started at 60. She'd been around for years doing theater, and it was Golden Girls that made her a star. And I was talking to an actor friend of mine yesterday about, I said, you're now growing into a character actor. He had been a leading man, and he's at an age where he's now booking more than he ever did. And it's a career that you can have until you're 100 years old, literally.
I first interviewed, I first saw Estelle Getty in Torch Song Trilogy on Broadway. I didn't know who she was, but she was wonderful. And then a number of years later, I interviewed her following her Emmy win for Golden Girls. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned to her, I saw you in the Torch Song Trilogy. And she said, how many times?
Well, as the story goes, she had been doing it out here, I believe, at the Mark Taper Forum, and the casting director saw her in that and brought her in for Golden Girls, and that's how she got that. So, those stories happen all the time. This is something I tell actors often, is that we have long memories, and if you're good, we may not hire you for the very next thing we're doing. It could be a year down the road. It could be years down the road. I asked an actress a couple years ago, she was on a Ryan Murphy show, and I said, how did that come about? And she said the producer had seen her in a production of Death of a Salesman 20 years before at South Coast Rep, and wrote her name down and said, I got to hire her at some point. And lo and behold, 20 years later, she gets a call and says, we want you to come in for it. So you just never know.
Have you ever seen somebody walk in and thought, this person is about to change their life today? Or something along those lines?
Yeah, sure. There's been people that have come in that the minute they walk in the room, you go, okay, we don't need to see any more people. And that happens it's few and far between. I wish that was frequent, but you can tell almost instantaneously. And and sometimes it's people that you would least expect, that maybe don't have a lot of training, that one of the things that I like to do is I cast as wide a net as possible when I'm bringing people in. And one of the benefits of the self-tape process is that we can do that. Back when we were doing in person, I could see maybe 30 to 40 people in a day, and that was a long day. And I had to be very selective about who I was bringing in. So say we're reading 5 parts that day, 5 roles. There's a limited number of people I could bring in for those because it's simply, there was time constraints. We got to give everybody about 10, 15 minutes per read. Now I can bring in 100 people for a part instead of 5 or 6. And it affords me the ability to go, if that person looks kind of interesting, I don't know them, but the resume looks interesting, give them a shot. And you just don't know. Sometimes there's, a diamond in the rough somewhere. And I love finding those. That's really fun to find somebody that nobody else has seen yet and that's just brand new. And even after doing this for 27 years, I still get excited when that happens.
I would think so. You mentioned something earlier that is fairly new to me. I'm finding I see the word more and more frequently. Verticals. What are verticals?
It's meant to be watched on your phone.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's shot vertically. As opposed to horizontally. And it was one I had 2 years ago when I got a call from a line producer that I had worked with on a number of movies for Lifetime. And she called out of the blue in January of 2024, and she said, "Do you want to do a vertical?" And I said, "Well, you have to explain to me what that is. I have no idea what these are." And she said, "Well, they're also called microdramas." And I said, "Again, explain." I don't know what that is either. They originated in China about 5 years ago. The best way I could describe them, and I'm stealing this from somebody because I read this description. I think it's a really good description of what these are. They said if TikTok married a soap opera and had a baby and fed it Red Bull and gave it a credit card, you would have a microdrama vertical. Essentially, their scripts are about 85 to 95 pages long, which is the length of a TV movie or a feature film. But they're chopped into little bits. And what they call episodes. Now, what we think of episodes is what, we watch a television show and it's a half hour or an hour. The episodes of these are 1 minute to 3 minutes long. And so they take a feature-length script and they break it into tiny parts. And they drop each episode. Usually the way they do it to market them is, and you may have seen this on your phone, you may have seen it on Facebook or Instagram and not realize what they were. They'll drop, 6 to 10 episodes on the Meta platforms. And Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, they get you hooked. Because after every minute or every 2 minutes, there's a cliffhanger. And you want to see what keeps happening. And after maybe episode 8 or 9, they take you to a paywall. And then you have to start. You sign up. And all of these vertical companies have platforms, just like Netflix or Hulu. And you subscribe to them. So this started, as I said, about 5 years ago in China. And it's grown tremendously in the last couple of years. I got into it 2 years ago, really in its infancy. I would say even 2 years later, it's still in like the toddler stage. There's so many ways they can go with these now. Last year, I think, was a year of growth. This year, I think, is a year of evolution. the company I work with is called Flare Flow. They're based out of Beijing, China. We report to our bosses in China, and but we have a team here in the U.S. And really talented group of people. And we have writers, producers, directors that have done traditional television and film that have come into this space, and the challenge for them is to create kind of a new model of a script, because most scripts aren't written where there's a cliffhanger every minute or 3 minutes. So it's, while it's similar to a soap opera, it's a soap opera on crack. I mean, it's much faster, much more accelerated pace. And it's exciting to be in a part of the business that we are literally creating as we speak. Now they're calling movies horizontals.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll watch for that.
Now some of them are being shot horizontally as well. They're shooting them in dual ways, so they can redistribute it somewhere else. So they'll shoot it vertically for your phone, and they might sell it down the road as a movie. That's not as frequent. It's becoming a little more prevalent, but I would say the majority of them are shot just this way. So directors have to learn a new way of doing it. It's a different way of shooting. It's much more close up. It's heightened reality. And I keep going back to the soap opera model, but that's really what it is. In fact, just recently, Procter & Gamble have gotten involved in this, and they were the granddaddies of soaps.
Excuse me.
They basically founded what we know as soap operas back in the radio days.
Right. And we'll be right back. If you'd like to be more involved with us at Still Here Hollywood, you definitely can. Just visit patreon.com/StillHereHollywood. You can support us for as little as $3 a month. You can get our episodes a day before they post anywhere else. You can see what guests will be coming up and submit questions for them. You can even tell us what stars you want us to have on as guests. You'll see what goes on before and after the episode, plus exclusive behind-the-scenes info, pics, video, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/StillHereHollywood. Paul, when you're looking to cast something, how do you get in touch with the talent?
Well, the process usually is twofold. There's a service called Breakdown Services. They've been around for 60 years. And back when I worked at the talent agencies, the breakdowns would go out basically would come in once a day. So as a casting director, I get a script. I send it into Breakdown Services. Their name kind of says what they do. They take the script and they break it down. It's character descriptions, plot synopsis, who's producing, who's directing, who's casting, the location, how much money is in the budget for each role. That goes to them. They format it and they send it out to where I tell them to. So we can release it strictly to agents and managers. We can release it strictly to actors. Actors can sign up at a service called Actors Access. It's the same company. And or we could do both. And I can send it out here. I can release it in New York, Chicago, wherever. And it's worldwide. They go out, submissions start coming in. I go through the submissions, and I choose who I want to bring in, and then the process starts. Now, back in the day, it was going through the submissions and setting them up for in-person auditions. We've actually been doing a few in-person with verticals now. I miss the days when we used to do it. The job used to be a very social job, and now it's very solitary because you're at home looking at tapes. And so I like to meet the actors because as I said earlier, you can get a sense of them and who they are just from the minute you say hello to them. And you miss that with the tape. So there's no vetting process with that. But I set them up to tape. We get the tapes in. I go through the tapes. I then send my selections to the producer and director. And then they go through it, and we just keep narrowing it down.
Do you think we'll ever get back to the point where there's more in person? You had mentioned that because of the pandemic, and we couldn't be in front of anybody.
Yeah. I don't think so. I think that ship has sailed. I think we've gotten used to this way of doing things. The first couple of years of doing it, there was a lot of complaints from actors that they missed being in the room, that I could win the room. And what my response to that was, yes and no. You could be the most charismatic person on the planet. And many times I had people come in there, and I loved bringing these particular actors in because they were always really engaging and funny. And that didn't mean they were going to get the part. It came down to the performance. Whoever was the best for the role would get the part. So I don't care how humorous you were. If you didn't fit the role properly, it wasn't going to happen. And people have short memories about how tough it was when you had to do in person. Especially there's a period that has largely gone away called pilot season, which was between January and April of every year. And there were years where they were casting 100 pilots in that period of time. So it was a feeding frenzy. And you might have 5 auditions in one day if you were a hot actor at the time. And so you're driving from Culver City to Hollywood to Manhattan Beach to all over LA, Santa Monica. And you get to the location, you don't know where the room is, or you get to a studio lot and you can't find the casting office, and you get in there and you have flop sweat because you've been running around the lot for a half hour, and you walk in and they say, "Oh, come on, right in." The minute you walk in the door, they're ready for you, and you're not ready at that point.
Right.
And so all the preparation you did went out the window because now you're in a frazzled state. You just got there, and
I would think nerves come into play all the time.
That's the other part of it. You could know the material backwards and forwards in your sleep, and you walk in the room, and there's a room there's myself and the producer, the director, and you don't expect all these people. Nerves kick in. You don't remember your first name, and we all do this. You get nervous, and sometimes you say stupid things, and that happened quite often too, where you knew that wasn't the person when they were calm and cool and collected. But so they forget about all of that stuff, and they forget that back in the day when we didn't have tape, if you were out of town, that was it. You missed the audition.
Right.
And now you could physically be anywhere in the world, and you're able to put this thing together. It's much more efficient. I think it's much more equitable. You're able to see exponentially more people than you would have. And it's cheaper. You're not spending your day in the car burning gas and missing work and having to hire a babysitter, and you just get a lighting kit and sometimes a microphone, and you just use your cell phone, and that's it. And so you're talking about expenditure of like $100, and you're fine, and a backdrop. And what's interesting is the first couple of years after the pandemic, there was a lot of complaints about, we want to go back to the old way. We want to get back in the room. And that was actually part of the strike in 2023. A lot of actors were complaining that, oh, the casting directors need to go back into their offices. Well, the reality is most of us don't have offices anymore. The people we work for don't pay for them. That used to be part of the deal. So I work out of my apartment, and I can speak for most of my colleagues, unless I'm working on a studio feature or if you're working on a series, they provide it to you. But otherwise, if you're in the independent market like I am and was a freelance casting director for so many years, I would work at whatever spot, wherever the production company was. So that's not the case anymore. So we don't have offices. There's nowhere to bring you. And there used to be places. There was a place over in Hollywood that casting would rent, and we would tape them there. That's gone away since the pandemic. So there literally is nowhere to bring these people. So that's another reason why, and it's all about cost. It's cheaper to do it this way. But what I was going to say was, in the last couple of years, the times that I've done live auditions, people have gotten so out of practice from it that they come in and they're like, oh, we'd rather tape. So it went the opposite way.
Well, you can do it as many times as you want if you're in the privacy of your own basement or something.
Yeah, you can do. We don't know if it's the 47th take that you've sent in to us, as opposed to, coming in and, as I said, nerves kick in, the material well, and then you get in there and you flub a line or it just doesn't go well for you, and that's it. And it's thank you, goodbye. And that happened quite often.
I know when I was doing some auditions for voiceover work, I was on vacation in London, and I got a text saying, record this script on your iPhone. On my iPhone, yeah, just go into a room, talk into the, okay. But it's interesting the way that works now. You used to, a lot of people talked about building studios in their homes.
Yeah, look, I think it affected actors that had been around a long time, that were used to the way we did it since the beginning of Hollywood, were really affected badly by it, because the way of doing things had changed dramatically, literally overnight. We were slowly heading that way, but the pandemic accelerated it by about 10 years, I think. And it made it a necessity. But I also tell people, thank God we have the technology that we had then. Had the pandemic happened 10 years earlier, the entire business would have shut down. There wouldn't have been any work at all. We were able to get up and running within a couple of months. I mean, I was casting a movie in June of 2020, and that would have been absolutely impossible.
Thinking back to when you would encounter more people in person, have you ever seen someone talk themselves out of a role?
I worked with a casting director that would advise actors to, when they finished, leave. Just walk out of the room. If we didn't have anything to say, just go. Often, they'd finish the scene and they'd say something along the lines of, I could have done that better. Oh, I'd like to try that again. Or they just make a face. And the expression this casting director had is, "You're sold it, don't buy it back." And
good line.
Don't make us rethink what we're thinking and second guess our thoughts on it. You did well. You're going to be your own worst critic. You always are. And I think that's just human nature. I mean, we're very harsh on ourselves. And most of the actors I know that I'm friends with are their own worst critics. And so you also can't go into a room trying to read our minds. You don't know what we're thinking. I mean, I've been in rooms with producers, directors that were as cold as ice. And I'm sure the actors thought, oh, they hate me. And it's just their personalities, or they were just all business. And then there's people that are warm and friendly, and that the actor walks out of the room thinking, oh, I got the job. And they're like, man, they didn't like them for whatever reason. So you can't figure out what we're thinking. And, back in the day when we were doing the live auditions, you could often hear through the door. You'd be in the waiting room and hear what they were doing and go, okay, well, they're doing it differently than I was preparing. And they're spending an awful lot of time with them in there. And then you go in and they only spent 2 minutes with me. Well, that's not good. And you don't know why we spent all that time with that person. It could have been we were giving them adjustments and redirections or whatever. So my advice is when you're done, and just leave and get it out of your mind. And it's easier said than done. I mean, because there's some instances where it could be a life-changing thing. It could be a series regular or something that could really alter the course of your life. But you have to have a thick skin, and you have to reject rejection and not personalize it.
Boy, that's hard to do.
It's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I'm not on the other side of it. But I know I feel for the actors. I had to record a birthday wish for somebody on my phone recently, and I did it about 25 times to get it. I didn't like the way I sounded. I didn't like the way I looked. And, so practice makes perfect. And the more people do this, the more used to it they are. And I don't hear the complaints I heard a few years ago about the self-tape process. In fact, I hear the opposite now, that they're very grateful for it, largely.
Yeah.
I had a class a few months ago they were largely under 25 years old, and I said to one of them, okay, it's 2003, and you have an audition for CSI Miami. How did you get your script and sides for the audition? And nobody knew. It was emailed, and I said no. And I said, CSI Miami shot in Manhattan Beach. I asked this actor, I said, where do you live? And he said, Burbank. And I said, okay, you get a call at 6 o'clock at night from your agent. And they said, you have an appointment tomorrow at 4 o'clock for CSI Miami. I said, you had to physically drive to Manhattan Beach to pick up those sides at 6 o'clock at night. Or if you were lucky, the agent had them. But oftentimes you had to go to the casting office. And then you would get there. Now, you can imagine driving from Burbank to Manhattan Beach at 6 o'clock at night could take you potentially 2 hours to get there. You get there, and there's a bin supposedly outside the door that we would leave these in for the actors. Well, somebody got there before you and stole them to sabotage the people coming in after. So you get down there and there's nothing. So you have to go in the next day and get there early to hope that you can get a hold of them and practice in the waiting room. And they all looked at me like, oh my God, we never even thought about that. But that's how it was. Much harder for an actor. And now you can have a day job and you can work around it. But you could tape something at 3 o'clock in the morning if you wanted to.
Can you tell me something small that an actor does that immediately elevates them in your eyes?
This is going to sound kind of actory, but making strong choices right from the outset. Understanding who the character is, and the minute you get on screen, I know you have a clear understanding of the character and the scene. And that is small. I mean, it's small choices like that, and interesting choices. Here's something small that an actor did. A good example. I'll give you two, actually.
Okay.
We had a scene. It was just kind of a mundane scene. The guy knocks on a door, woman answers it, and she lets him in. Every 9 out of 10 actors just did this, and one actor put his eye right up to the camera and then pulled back, so as if he was looking through a peephole. And when I first looked at the tape, it was a still, and before I put it on, and I went, what is that? And I hit it and went, that made me think, this guy put some thought into this. It made it interesting to watch. So I want it to be interesting. It needs to grab your attention. Another example was something recent where it was a dinner party scene, and I hate these types of scenes. So there's one character speaks, and then because it's a group scene, 3 other people talk, and then you talk, and then 3 other people talk, then you talk. So in the course of 4 pages, you may have said 3 things. So it's a lot of standing there and listening to what other people say and reacting. So the guy saw that it was a cocktail party, this one particular actor, and I'm not big on props usually unless they're organic to the scene. This worked. He took a cocktail glass and put an orange slice on it. He said his line. 3 other people are talking. He sips out of the glass, takes a bite of the orange, and he does this throughout the scene, and it made it fun to watch, and it made sense in the scene. I sent the tape to the director that night. 5 minutes later, she calls me, and I sent it with 10 other tapes, and she said, hire the guy with the orange. And a couple weeks later, I go to set, and I happen to be there today. They're shooting this particular scene, and the director grabs me, and she said, I incorporated the orange bit into the scene. I liked what he did. And so a little interesting choice like that got put into the actual movie. And so those little touches like that can help, determine whether you're going to get the part or get a call back, or whether you don't.
And we'll be right back. Do you ever get the opportunity, or are you the one who says yay or nay to a particular person, or do they hear that from their agent or manager or whomever?
Sometimes we get the chance to tell the actor directly, and it happened a couple years ago where I was sitting with the director, and we said, let's just call him. We knew the guy's number, so we called him, and he reacted the way you would expect him to. But then the next day, his girlfriend called and said, I just want to tell you what actually happened when you called him. He tried to stay composed on the phone and act professional, but she said when he got the news from you guys, he jumped up and down and then put his hands over his face and started to cry. He was ready to give up. He was ready to leave town. He had been out here for a number of years and nothing was happening. And she said, I thought you'd want to see. And I said, well, you're making me cry now, because it goes back to what we talked about earlier about affecting somebody's life in a nice way. That was really special. Most of the time, we give the information to the agent, and the agent relays it to the actor, and then haggles with us for more money or whatever.
Can success actually change an actor's casting energy when they walk into a room?
Do you mean? Are you saying ego or
whatever they put forth, however they present, can that change?
I've seen it over time. I'm a firm believer you are who you are, and fame or success amplifies it. So if you're a good person, you become more philanthropic, or if you're a jerk, it can make you a bigger jerk with power. I've seen both. I Yeah, and I look, if it comes really fast, it can affect you, and it's just being a human being. I mean, if there's a lot of younger actors where I've seen it, they get very quick success, and that's a rarity. And then they don't have any perspective about how the business works. They haven't been in it long enough, and they think, oh, this is how it's going to be, and they end up having a rude awakening at some point. And it's, the expression, you meet the same people on the way down as you do on the way up. And so you don't want to burn bridges, and you don't want to cop an attitude, because we hear about it. Very rarely do I get calls from set about performances. It's mostly behavior. There was an actress that I was going to hire on a movie a few years ago, and the line producer called me, and she said, if you hire this person, my entire crew will quit, because they had worked with her on something else, and she made the hair and makeup people cry, and the wardrobe people cry, and
Faye Dunaway. Just a guess.
No, this was actually a brand new actor that was just, and I said, no, this is not a good way to start a career. And but if you develop a reputation of being a nice person to work with, you're going to get hired over and over and over again. Directors are really loyal. Casting directors are loyal. And if you develop a reputation of being an ass, then the same thing's going to happen. You're just not going to get the work. It will eventually catch up to you. I mean, it may not happen instantaneously, but as word gets around, it does catch up.
Have you ever watched a television show or a play or a movie and said to yourself, who made that casting choice?
Oh, all the time.
Oh, do you?
All the time. It's kind of ruined my experience watching film and TV, because I look at it from a different perspective now, and I'm looking at the technical. It's like the Wizard of Oz. You're seeing behind the curtain, and I still enjoy watching things, but I'm a big believer in the day player needs to be on the same level playing field as the lead. And I think I use this as an example all the time, the movie Tootsie. If you go from top to bottom in that movie, people with one line were fantastic. And I've watched way too many things where, it takes you right out of it if the person's not good. I used to do a lot of co-productions. This hasn't been the case in years, but back in the day, we were doing Lifetime or Hallmark movies that would be co-productions with Canada. So I would cast the leads here, and then they would cast locals out of like Winnipeg, Canada. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple instances where I'd go, did they just drag that person off the street, like playing a waitress or whatever? And sometimes those parts can be the most interesting parts to watch in the movie. They steal a scene. But yeah, I'm a control freak with that stuff, so I want to make sure across the board everybody's good. And I don't have a team. I work by myself. When I started out, I worked with other casting directors. And about 15 years ago, I started my own business. And it's just me.
Why didn't you go into full-time producing or directing?
I've produced a couple of things. And directing is something, I can't wait much longer, but it might be something down the road at some point. It's something that's intrigued me, but this is a full-time gig when you're doing this. And I've been really fortunate that the last couple of years I've been very busy with the vertical business has been a godsend. And when I got into this, there was a lot of skepticism from colleagues of mine, both agents, managers, other casting directors, going, "Oh, why are you doing that?" And I've never been on the ground floor of a new sector of the business, and very rarely do we create a new part of the entertainment business. I mean, it doesn't happen often,
Right.
and we're kind of pioneers in this. So I go where the work is. That's what's kept me going for all these years. And one of the things that I hear about verticals is I did a class a couple of months ago, and an actress in the room said, I went to an acting conservatory, and I can't imagine doing such silly stuff as this. And she really blasted these as not an art form. And I said, she said the storylines are stupid, and I was ready for it because I've heard it from enough people that don't know what they're talking about. And I use this as an example. I said, oh yeah, girl falls for handsome guy, mysterious rich guy, and he's actually obsessed with her mother, and he kidnaps both of them and locks them in a cabin. And I give this whole convoluted story. And she said, yeah, exactly. And I said, no, that wasn't a vertical. That was a soap opera called As the World Turns. And the actress was Julianne Moore. And I said, whatever happened to her? And so these are, a CAA agent said recently, these are incubators for future stars. And it's a great springboard for other things. You're earning as you're learning. I have a friend who was a personal trainer, went to Tisch, was making his living basically as a personal trainer, got into this. He's put in about 4,000 hours on set in the last 2 years. He said he's a far better actor than he was before. He's now starting to produce these. And he's very grateful that, he's doing something that he loves. He's acting. And if you get into acting, you want to act. So my feeling is pull every string you can. And you never know what that opportunity is going to lead to, or who's going to see you, and we've already created stars within this space that reminds me of 20 some years ago when Hallmark started doing their Christmas movies and their rom-coms. And I reached out to an agent to check an availability on one of their actors, and they said, well, we won't do that. That's where our actors' careers go to die. And that attitude changed very, very quickly. And now the Christmas movies, everybody wants to do them. And they're very lucrative for an actor.
And Hallmark has its own channel now.
They have their own channel. Yeah, and but if you look back at the history of show business, every time there was a major change in it, there was people that poo-pooed it. Whether we went from silent film to talkies. Television was the vast wasteland. Then I just read the Barry Diller book, and he was talking about when VHS came about, or even previous to that. He has a couple chapters about basically inventing the movie for television, and how nobody thought it was going to succeed. They said, well, we're never going to get directors to do these. Actors won't do them. How are we going to budget these? And that became a huge success. Then years later, when he was running Paramount, the VHS business was starting, and his colleagues were, we got to kill this because this is going to really hurt us theatrically. And he said, no, we got to embrace it. Streaming was sort of dismissed. And now it's this. And I think this sort of fits in with our short attention spans today. It's gotten shorter and shorter. If you talk to anyone under 25, most of the time they're on their phone and they're watching YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. They're not watching linear television. They're not really watching a lot of the streamers. And and video games is also where and that was the thing that came up during the strike. They were battling, these greedy CEOs at Disney and Warner Brothers and what have you, and a producer friend of mine said the real enemy is TikTok and video games. That's where they're losing their audience to, and that's why things have changed so much. I think the last 5 years there's been more change than in the previous 25 that I was here. It's been a massive change, some for the worse, some for the better. And I'm but this to me is the only part of the business, verticals, that's currently expanding and not contracting. And the company I work for is, this year, the mandate is to innovate, not imitate. So there's a lot of these, if you watch them, they follow like 4 or 5 different tropes that are in every one of them. We're now trying to delve into sitcoms, thrillers, westerns, musicals. There's so many different ways you can go with these things.
What have you done that you're proudest of, besides leaving Scranton?
Well, that goes without saying. My family won't be happy to hear that. They're all back there. I think just the overall body of work and that I'm here still 27 years later, because I got out here with no connections, and really was determined to make this work, and the fact that it did is, I worked my tail off the last. I joke that I clawed my way to the middle, and but I'm here, and there's a lot of people that aren't still in the business that I started out with. And then it's, as far as like work, it's seeing people on screen that are in movies or television shows that I helped along the way. That's a really gratifying feeling.
Any parting words of advice for people who are dying to get into the business in front of the camera?
Be tenacious. This is going to sound cliche, but you have to love this. It can't be something that's just a passing hobby. This is something you have to give your all to, and tenacity, stick-to-itiveness, which isn't really a word, but I'm
sure it
making
is
a word, and just the ability to not personalize everything, to just keep plugging along, and take whatever opportunities come your way. This is a business of relationships and connections, and I'm still working with the same people that I started with at the talent agency 27 years ago. Some of them are showrunners, some of them are producers, some of them are agents, and we've all come up the ladder, and I've happily maintained a lot of those relationships. And you gotta, as an actor, know the business part of the business, and that's a big problem for actors. They know the show part, they don't know the business. It's not show fun, it's not show friends, it's show business. Read the trades, know what's happening, the trends in the business, know why things are happening. Why is there no pilot season anymore? Why is there fewer jobs in film and television? And it's not always the fault of your agent. That seems to be the go-to for actors. It's they're not sending me out on things. No, the agent gets a 10% commission, and the other 90% is your responsibility. You've got to be the sole proprietor of your career, and you can't leave that to other people.
And you can't go around thinking that other people are going to do it for you.
No, nobody's going to do it for you. Yeah, so.
There's been a production slowdown, and even predictions that Hollywood is going the way of the dinosaur. Do you see that?
No. Uh, I don't think it's going the way of the dinosaur. I think we're in a period of evolution, and I think we got hit with a tsunami of issues at one time. We had a once in 100-year pandemic that was happening at the same time that the streaming business was starting to get big. And so I think the studios and networks probably would have been more cautious about jumping into that as quickly as they did into streaming. They jumped head first really quickly. I think what would have taken 5 or 10 years was done in a year. They're like, oh, everybody was trapped in their own homes, and I think they got the wrong impression that this was, we all got to get into this, and they abandoned a model that the commercial television model that had worked for 75 years for something that wasn't as lucrative, and now you're seeing a consolidation of that. And then the strikes. The strikes were ill-timed. I argue I'm going to get a lot of arguments probably from writers and actors that I know, but I don't think they should have gone on strike in 2023. They went into the strike with no leverage, no game plan, and came out with nothing. And they shut the business down for a year. And now they're threatening to do it again.
Yeah.
And that would be suicidal. It's there are issues, but I think they could be hashed out, without shutting the whole town down. And it was devastating. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. The 2 strikes were catastrophic. They really had tremendous collateral damage. Massive slowdown in work. There was a vacuum to be filled. When we had the 2008 writer's strike, we saw an emergence of reality TV. With these, it was more reality TV, game shows, sports, and they're always going to find a way to fill that void. And now these verticals, really, that's I don't think it's a coincidence that they emerged in 2023, right when the strikes were happening. So I think they need to accept the fact that we're not in 1995 anymore. We're in a different time. The business is incredibly different than it was even 10 years ago. And there are fewer jobs in television, especially, in large part because if somebody told me 10 years ago that Meryl Streep and Robert De Niro and Kate Winslet and you name it would be doing television series, I would have said that's insane. But that's the reality. So the people that would have gotten the leads in shows are now getting guest stars, and the guest stars are getting co-stars. And it knocked everybody down a tier. And there's been a kind of a readjustment period. An actor I'm friends with said to me recently, like, I was a series regular on a show a couple years ago, and now I'm getting called in for co-stars. And I said, yeah, and take them. Because the co-star now is what the guest star used to be. And would you rather sit at home and do nothing or get seen? So I think we're out of the worst part of it. I think we're starting to see, believe it or not, this year, more of a pilot season. I talked to agents and managers, and they feel like it's gotten quite busy. And to go back to the verticals, there's about 30 of those on breakdowns every day. it's hard to keep up with them if you're an agent. I was talking to one yesterday, and she said it takes a full day to just cover all of just the vertical stuff, which is great. It's providing lots of work for not only actors but also for crew members that have been sidelined the last couple of years.
Are fewer risks being taken now?
Yeah, I think so. I miss the days of. I don't like these 8 to 10 episode series and then there was an article that I read a couple weeks ago about why are there no more hit sitcoms, and one of the theories is they don't give the shows enough time to find an audience or to gel. And if you look at classic shows like Seinfeld or the show in its first year or so was not the show that it ended up being, and it takes time for the characters for the writers to figure out the characters and what have you. And we don't do that anymore. They'll put a show on for 8 episodes and then it's not back on for another year, and so I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah,
right.
there used to be it seems to me there used to be a lot of, or there are a lot of examples of shows that were not exactly what they ended up being at the beginning. Designing Women, Dick Van Dyke, Cheers almost didn't make it.
Right.
Yeah.
Cheers is a great example. That finished dead last in its first season in the ratings, and they looked at that and said, do we have anything better to replace it with? And they gave it a shot, and it took about 2 or 3 years to get an audience. But they don't do that anymore, and I think there needs to be a happy medium. The binging is great, but I like to look forward to something every week, and I think it creates more buzz. And we've kind of thrown that model out the window in large part. I think that's why White Lotus does as well as it does, because it's not dropped all at once. You have to keep watching it, and it creates a buzz over the period of 2 or 3 months.
The Crown was another example.
Yeah.
Where you had something to look forward to every week.
Every week. And I miss, this is being very old school, but I miss the days of a night of TV where you could sit down and just watch, one show after the other that night. And I think I feel bad for, the people coming up today that don't have that opportunity. We used to have a shared experience, a communal experience.
That you would talk about around the water cooler the next morning.
Well, I was listening to, after his tragic death, there was a lot of interviews with Rob Reiner, and one of the recent interviews he had was he was talking about All in the Family, when he said when that aired, we averaged 40 to 45 million viewers a week, and he said we had 200 million people in the country, so almost a fourth of the country was watching it on the same night at the same time, because we didn't have VCRs then, and you could talk about it the next day. And he said what's really humbling is that you talk to anyone under the age of 40 today and they have never heard of the show. Yeah. Well, that's another pet peeve of mine with actors is I talk to younger actors today and they don't know what came before them. And that's something that if you're getting into this profession, it's a different story if you're going to be an architect or a plumber or an electrician. But if you're getting into acting, you should have an idea of what came before you. And I had an awareness, and I'm sure you did as well. I knew who Bette Davis was and James Stewart and the old classic Hollywood stars. And they certainly weren't of my time. And it was harder to watch that stuff then. Now it's at our fingertips, and they don't pay attention to it.
You can learn who Thelma Ritter was.
And nothing is new,
Right.
And I do know who I'm old enough to know who Thelma Ritter is.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, for me too. Selma Diamond. She was another one.
All those old character actors.
Still Here Hollywood is a production of the Still Here Network. All things technical run by Justin Zangerly. Theme music by Brian Sanishin. and executive producer is Jim Lichtenstein.